I'm a 23-year-old woman, and I am half Cherokee from Georgia in the USA. At the time that this story took place, my fiancé and I were living on a large farm in Maryland. We didn't use the farm, but we were renting a small house on the property, and we were free to come and go around the grounds. I was only 19 at the time that this took place, and only residents in our home were myself, my fiancé, and our cat and dog. Our cat was a lunatic barn cat that I had rescued because I can't say no to animals that need help, and our dog was my loyal pit bull who is a sweet, cuddly, scaredy cat. She weighed about 75 pounds and is afraid of her own shadow. Our farm was situated on about 20 acres of land, and our driveway was about a half-mile long. So usually when I would get home from work, my loyal dog and I would go for a walk, and usually I brought my fiancé with me. Not that I was afraid to go out alone, just that he spends too much time playing games, and he needs to use his legs. After our driveway was about 12 miles long of a road through woods and farms until it finally reconnected with civilization. So it was safe to say that we were far from the other people, except for our landlord, of course. The first mile was through an open farmland, followed by a brief patch of forest, and then about a half mile of wheat fields, and then solid forest for 2 more miles. Now they got a bit of a layout, onto the real creepy bit. So it started off like any other weekday. My fiancé and I returned home after work to our happy cottage and happy pets. Harley, our dog, was frantic to go for a walk. So I quieted her and changed into walking clothes and asked if my fiancé would join me. He had gotten home shortly after me and said he had seen one of the coyotes that we have around close to the field by our house. But as you may know, coyotes are mostly scavengers, especially out here on the East Coast, so I wasn't too worried, and I'm very capable of defending myself. I called him a puss and then told Harley that we could go and we would be fine without him. Laughing to myself, we left the cottage and started walking towards the driveway. The sun was going down and the October air had started to get a chill to it, and it rustled through the cornfields next to our long driveway. The corn was about 6 feet tall at this point in the year, and impossible to see through, so I assumed that my fiancé was just trying to scare me, because there was no way he could have seen a coyote in this field. Harley was enjoying her time in the field, tearing in and out of the corn stalks on her walk up the driveway, and I knew that, as big of a coward as she is, that she would alert me to any danger very quickly by running away. By the time I reached the end of the driveway, the sun had set and the moon had already come out and was shining high above the fields. It wasn't quite full, but it provided enough light that I didn't need my flashlight or Harley's collar light. We turned left down the road and proceeded across the first section of field. The first field was soybeans, and if you didn't know, they are relatively short plants that nothing but a rabbit could hide in. And off in the distance, I spotted a few deer, but nothing alarming, so we relaxed and enjoyed our walk through the night air. I threw a stick and Harley brought it back, over and over again. Typical dog and owner stuff. We reached the first small section of trees, and Harley stopped and bumped into my leg, letting me know there was something ahead. It wasn't a coyote or a deer, there was a rabbit that had been hit by a passing car and was still struggling. As much as I hate to say this, there was no way it was going to live, and honestly, it's probably what drew the coyote pack in. I knelt down by it and used my knife to quickly put it out of its misery, as my family had taught me, and let it pass into the next life. Feeling sad but somewhat relieved that all we had encountered was a handful of deer and a poor rabbit, we continued our walk and passed through the next field. This was a wheat field, and the wheat was about ready for harvest, so it was quite tall and hard to see through. The field was quiet though, and Harley didn't do anything, so I figured the coyotes had passed on, if there had been any at all. Now, this is the part that you've been waiting for, and I don't know what it was, but here it is. We rounded the corner of the field and into an area with wheat in our left and the forest on our right, and the air seemed to go still. Harley got closer to me and I heard rustling in the wheat field. I saw 3 tails circling back towards the forest. Coyotes. The eastern coyotes are small, but in a pack they get pretty ballsy. Harley raised her heckles and I yelled, "Get out of here, go on!" as loud as I could, and the coyotes, startled, scattered off into the trees. I decided to turn around and get out of there before they decided to regroup, because I am brave, but I'm not going to walk into a darkened forest with a coyote pack and a cowardly pit bull. We turned to head back, and again, I heard a rustling in the wheat. A confused coyote? I thought it must be, but no. Harley was standing stock, still staring at the wheat, and I whistled for her to come to me. That high-pitched, ear-pierced, two-fingered whistle that snapped her out of it for a second. Then, my whistle was returned from inside the wheat. All of a sudden, all of the family legends I had heard came flooding back to me, and I expected to see a tall, thin creature emerge, but nothing did. I didn't smell rotting meat or feel a sense of dread. Instead, I was transfixed with fear and curiosity. It whistled again. The whistle was returned again. Very human sounding, but at the same time not. Against my better judgment, I said, "Hello?" And my voice replied, "Hello." My hand on my knife, I said, "Show yourself." Silence. No bugs. No coyotes. No Harley noises. Just my own breath. Slowly, the rustling started again, and I turned on my flashlight. I shined it on the wheat field, and what I saw confuses me to this day. Animal eyes. The green-yellow reflection of the light was cast back at me, but what it was connected to didn't make sense. There was a girl, no more than 14 or 16, crouched in the wheat. She wore what I think must have been some kind of deerskin or fur, and she was naked otherwise. She was very thin, and looked as though her skin had never seen light. Her hair was long and tangled with wheat and leaves. Under any other circumstances, I would have said she was beautiful, but at that moment, she was terrifying. We stared at each other for what must have been a solid minute, but it felt like much longer, until I heard the unmistakable coyote howl from the forest. Both of our heads snapped towards the noise, and immediately, I heard her take off through the wheat towards the sound. At that moment, Harley took off towards our house, and I went after her. We didn't stop running until we got to the driveway, and I stopped, not wanting my fiancé to know I was running away from something. I could still hear the howling in the distance, and we started walking at a brisk pace. We made it back to the cottage with no further problems, and I didn't tell my fiancé about it, not wanting him to go out with a gun. She hadn't hurt me, so I didn't think it right to hunt her. I was awoken in the middle of the night that night by the sound of the coyotes calling outside of our cottage. This wasn't unusual, but now I wonder if she was with them. When I was coming home from work about a month later, I had stopped obsessing about that night, and I almost thought I had imagined it. When I had to slam on my brakes for something in the road, it was dark, and when my headlights hit its eyes, it reflected green and yellow. It was a large coyote. It just stared at my car for a moment and ran off into the woods. I know this sounds crazy, but I wonder if it was her.